Welcome to the lineup, Officer Magazine's roundup of this week's police and law enforcement news. I'm your host, Joe Vince, assistant editor for Officer Magazine. And with me today, my co-host, Officer Magazine editor, Paul Peluso. How was your Labor Day weekend, Paul?
It was great, Joe. Thanks for having me. How was yours?
Not too bad. Pretty relaxing. Took in a couple movies. But yeah, nothing too exciting, which I like on a 3-day weekend.
So it is football season, so I got to go to a high school football game with my daughters.
Oh,
Our
nice.
our friend's kid is in the marching band, so got to see him. But as football season gets underway here, and hopefully we start feeling some fall weather. I'm sure in different parts of the country you guys are. I'm sure there's plenty of officers out there having to do, assignments at football games for high schools and even local small colleges and even bigger colleges. But
Hmm.
just stay safe out there, and it's a cool thing to be able to do some of those assignments sometimes, but there can be issues.
Yeah, it could,
Yeah.
especially even at the high school level, those rowdy crowds. Let's get started. As always, we've got a packed show, even on a short holiday week or after a holiday week. We'll get started with our first story out of New Jersey, and it's deja vu all over again. Last week, we talked about officers being bombarded by fireworks while they were trying to break up an illegal street takeover. And it happened again, this time in Secaucus, where officers, I'll quote from Secaucus police chief saying, "Our officers came under attack last night, and I will not tolerate this unrest." These police officers were trying to break up an illegal street takeover. They were surrounded by a crowd of over 50 people and then showered with fireworks while they were trying to do this. Last week we talked about this happening in Portland, and in fact, it happened again on Labor Day in Portland, where officers, police were trying to break up a takeover. Um, Fireworks were thrown at them. They actually, I believe, towed one vehicle and cited other individuals, but um, I guess in my mind, I have this sense of you know the level of the type of offense that you are committing. There should be a proper response, I suppose. And these street takeovers are, while dangerous, they're still in a lot of cases minor traffic offenses. But when you start throwing explosive devices at officers, it brings it to a new level for no good reason.
Yeah, and you would hope that the punishment that's given here, that what is the offense of attacking with fireworks? It should be something more
Hmm.
serious than something more minor. And that would deter some of this, hopefully. But yeah, it keeps happening. It's a weird occurrence.
And a lot of places are trying to beef up the laws um, uh, for these types of incidents, where cars can be seized, things of that nature, creating severe punishments. Some states have started enacting this, but it's been slow. Um, but yeah, I'd like to see this stop. I don't think these street takeovers, kind of has peaked since the pandemic, and it's going to be a continued problem. Moving on to our next story. This is out of New Mexico, where New Mexico State police officer made an incredible rescue after a mother and her child and their dog became trapped when their vehicle was flipped over by swift waters and a flash flood. Um, Video from the scene shows this rescue, and I have talked before about how I'm always amazed at the creativity of officers on the scene of using just about anything they can find in order to perform their duties. In this case, an officer was able to um, get a backhoe and a ladder to help save the woman and the child and the dog. Um, you know, get them off their vehicle. And again, the ingenuity involved is just great.
Yeah, the fact that he was able to use that backhoe, that's pretty cool. And in the video is pretty cool how they were able to do this rescue. Thankfully it had a successful outcome. But yeah, like you said, just like officers and members of public safety in general using whatever is at their disposal to make the rescue happen. It's good to see.
And again, also this shows really too um, the dangers of these floodwaters and how sometimes you might think, hey, I'm in a truck or an SUV or whatever, I should be fine. But these storms come on fast. Though the flooding comes on fast, and it can be big trouble. So good job by this officer. Uh, Moving on to our next story. This is out of Michigan, where a proposed bill would require mandatory jail time for suspects um, who were accused of fleeing police officers. Um, yeah, it's a case of trying to um, you know, create severe punishments for individuals who are going to spark police chases, trying also to limit the public safety dangers that these chases, can create. Under the legislation, there'd be mandatory minimums for fleeing and leading law enforcement that would start at 182 days in jail and go up to as much as 5 years in prison if a death occurred during the incident. Um, eh, Again, places are trying to figure out ways to minimize the dangers that can come up with chases, and this is instead of trying to have officers maybe cut off pursuits. Here's a way of putting the onus, so to speak, on the suspect.
Yeah, and like we mentioned with the attacks with the fireworks in the previous stories, it is, trying to find that way to deter these incidents from happening with stricter punishments, stiffer penalties, and yeah, hopefully it works because yeah, it's always, always dangerous to be in any type of pursuit. And to be able to find a way to make them not happen and limit them is will only be better.
We're going to stay in Michigan for our next story. This is out of Livonia, where, excuse me, police used a grappler to stop a suspect who was fleeing officers. Um, eh, Dash cam footage captured this, and in these cases, when the grappler is deployed, it latches onto the axle and is able to stop the vehicle. Well, this suspect, once stopped by the device, decided he was going to try to to still get away, put the car in reverse, and hit the gas again. Did it a couple times until finally he yanked so hard that it ripped out the axle um, from the vehicle. And in the footage, you just see it just pop right off. And just an example of you can't get away from these types of devices. You have a better chance of just jumping out of the car and fleeing on foot.
Yeah, and before this call, Joe mentioned to you how this is a really cool device. Like you said, we've featured it on the website a few times when you have instances where it's used by departments. Not that many departments have it, but more and more are getting them. And this one, it was unusual, right? That it actually like ripped it
Mhm.
off, clean off. the axle of the other vehicle and disabled it that way. But but yeah, kudos to the officers for using it. And yeah, like we mentioned, anytime you can limit these chases, you can put a stop to them. You don't have an officer going out there laying stop sticks and they get hit, or there's a crash, or civilians are injured or killed. Uh, it's good outcomes.
Yeah, if you see in the video too that the initial stop is it's like a pit maneuver without the impact. It's that that continued trying to get out of the device that
Yeah.
caused the damage there. Um, Moving on to our next story, and it's our third story in a row. Out of Michigan. This is just such an unusual case. I was just fascinated by this. And a traffic stop of a suspected impaired driver in Michigan by Michigan State Police just outside of Warren. Um, Went along as just any other type of impaired driving traffic stop until officers recovered a handgun and later found out that this weapon had been stolen from the Syracuse Police Department in Syracuse, New York. Nearly 50 years ago, it was lifted from a station in 1979, and now somehow ended up in Michigan. Um, in this individual's car. I'm just amazed that I mean you've probably seen the stories or heard the stories about weapons and how just the travels they go from maybe being legally purchased to being used in a crime then to being um sold or passed along or whatever. But to have a weapon stolen in 1979 then end up being recovered here in 2025 is just remarkable.
Yeah, it would be funny to see the timeline of the life of this firearm.
Mm,
And once it left,
yeah.
what it's done since then, where it's been, who it's been with, and how this suspect, got a hold of it. But yeah, it's good that it was recovered and puts the end to that. I guess they get to, cross that one out of the books in Syracuse all these years later.
And I imagine it's a handgun that I got to think it's probably a revolver too. And so it's not even a weapon that officers would be using. Um, Moving on to our next story. This is out of Florida, and this gave me a little chuckle. Cape Coral police were called in for a possible burglary um, in progress. And when they reached the scene, they found that they had received help from, of all people, Batman. Well, in this case, a individual dressed in a Batman onesie. This is, and actually, this man's a former corrections officer, martial arts instructor. Um, the onesie he was wearing for his daughter's benefit. But he was able to jump into action. He had noticed a man who rummaging through his car, and then had followed him and cornered and was able to detain him when he found him in a neighbor's garage, and was able to keep him there until police arrived. Um, it I like these stories. It's great. The guy took photos with the officers. He's clearly not self-conscious about being seen with the onesie. Uh, I love that he was wearing it for his daughter, but still was able to jump into action, as I said.
Yeah, good for this guy. Yeah, he takes that photo with the officers and like you said, not afraid to be photographed in that slim fit onesie pajama that he has on. But I would caution, civilians shouldn't do this, shouldn't go out and chase
Mhm,
down someone that's breaking into cars. Luckily, he had, law enforcement experience and martial arts experience,
mhm.
and is more equipped for that than the usual everyday civilian. But at the same time, there has to be caution, paid there. But luckily it turned out okay, and the officers were able to apprehend the suspect.
Plus, I think anytime you wear that bat symbol on your
Oh
chest,
yeah.
it just ups your physical and experience levels, tenfold. So, moving on to our next story, and I'm not sure what to say about this one. This is out of Colorado, where Idaho Springs police were called in about an individual who was suspected of making fraudulent charges. They found out that this person also was wanted on a felony warrant. Um, the call was coming from a hot springs spa and resort, and that's where officers confronted the man. Initially, he seemed to be complying with them until he bolted. Well, in this case, the individual had just finished a mud bath and was covered in mud and also only wearing a Speedo as he is running through this resort. Um, uh, a, a, a drone was called in to help locate the man who eventually was found hiding in a residential shed. Um, if he's watched the body camera video, just seeing the guy, all just mud everywhere, only Speedos, galloping through this resort. Oh, I'm gonna have to scrub that out of my head
Yeah.
one of these days.
So I like how they use the drone to track him down. That's pretty cool. Yeah, not a pretty sight to see this guy in a skimpy Speedo covered in mud. But his name is Alec Bogus. Am I saying that correctly? Is his last name Bogus? But
I believe so.
yeah. So, funny funny story. I think this is a pretty good stupid criminal story, but at the same time, yeah, if you have someone not clothed but covered in mud, it might be tough to find them in a wooded area or wherever they were here. I don't know. So it was good they were able to use the drone and you know, didn't were able to find them eventually. Found hiding in a shed.
And you got it. Yeah, and you got to think it's like, oh, guy's in a mud bath. He's wearing Speedos. Is his levels of opportunity to flee and escape are kind of limited. You're figuring, hey, we've got him in kind of a good compromised spot. But you know what? Some suspects are can be very slippery. And yes, that was a pun. So that wraps it up for this week. As always, thanks again for listening.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for having me, Joe. And I did want to mention that the Station Design Awards, the nomination period, will be open until September 18th. So make sure you get those in. And if you have a facility that was built within the last 4 years, reach out to your architecture firm, and they'll be able to reach out to us and submit. You can find all the information on Officer.com.
Take care and stay safe.